Good morning, everybody, again. Not bad, not bad. You guys enjoying this second summer? It's October the 5th, I think. Feels like July, but who likes this kind of weather? Yeah, okay. I'm waiting for the snow, to be honest with you, because I want to make the ice rink again, but we've just started. Don't boo me yet, okay? I'll give you a reason to boo in about 10 minutes, probably. But I do like the weather. I like to be outside and do things with my girls in the summer. You know, in the summer months, we often go out to our fishing hole and we go fishing. Indy and I, we like to make different kinds of primitive traps. This year, this summer, we made an Arapuca bird trap, accidentally caught a squirrel. We've made primitive friction fires, but one of the things that we really like to do is bow and arrows. It's one of the things we like to do in our backyard, and it's something that's really popular here at the 5 Fun Days summer camp. And it's something that we enjoy doing. Let me see here. There we go. The batteries are working. Yeah, you can see Indy there. And over the summer, there was a stretch where we went outside every day, and probably for half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe even an hour, until we got too sunburned. We were out there shooting bow and arrows. And you can see in both pictures there that we've got a few different targets set up. There's the big circle with the different colors. It's a bit difficult for our practice arrows to stick into it. So you really got to aim it and get it right if you want it to stick. So we also have a smaller square target there. That one's made out of foam. So no matter where you hit it, the arrow's going to stick into it really, really well. And in this particular time, you can see we were watermelon hunting. Now, before we go too much further, I actually want to show you something, and I've asked King to help me out. So everybody give King a nice round of applause as he comes up here. Go down there.
I'm sorry for all the bad things I taught you.
Be careful. To watch your step there. Okay. I'm not that good at this. Indy's much better, but yeah, that's good. Hold on a second. That's great. I'm sorry, did you want to say something louder? I should take my glasses off if I'm going to do this, right? I said really. Now listen, when you're going to shoot bow and arrows, you can't shoot arrows willy-nilly. That's silly. You have to decide on what your target is. You need to know, what am I aiming for? Once you know what you're aiming for, then you can aim for it. Because see, even if you miss, even if you were to miss what you're aiming for, in this case it might be problematic, but if you miss what you're aiming for, you can always adjust. You know, if you miss your target, you can readjust and recalibrate, aim again, and fire. I'm not really going to shoot the arrow at King today because the camera's rolling. King, come on over here. I want you to remember this visual, though. It's only impressive if you can do that the entire time. I want you to remember the visual and remember the question. What are you aiming for? I'm going to leave that one. I'll take this, though. You can go back down there. Thank you very much. Good job. Thank you. It's all right. We got it on camera. I can edit it now. Our text this morning contrasts two sisters who are aiming at two different targets. We're going to turn to Luke 10, 38 to 42. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said, but Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, You are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." This is the first time that Mary and Martha are mentioned in the Scriptures. But the Scriptures, particularly the Gospel of John, portrays the sisters, as well as their brother Lazarus, as one of Jesus' closest and dearest friends. This friendship of theirs has already developed before this particular occurrence takes place. Hospitality at that time was highly relational. You wouldn't host strangers frequently, particularly not a large group of strangers, particularly not a large group of male strangers. So they're not welcoming strangers, they're welcoming their friend Jesus along with his disciples. So already at this time, Mary and Martha have a personal and close relationship with Jesus. And it's important to recognize that this entire scene, this interaction that will take place, is in the context of Jesus addressing his followers. Now notice too that they're associating with Jesus. He's welcomed in their home, even though he's really starting to draw attention. He's starting to stir up opposition, but he's still welcome in their home. Now this is a bonus point. I'm just throwing this one in for free. For those of you who remember the How Do I series from the summer. Martha clearly knows how to be a good steward and manage her finances. It's her house. That's what it specifically says. Martha opened her home. So it's her house. However that came about, perhaps a husband passed away, we don't know, but it's her house, and she is the head of the house. And she also has the means to provide a meal for that many people. So she's made some good decisions. She's been a good steward of her resources. Now here in this instance, the sisters are going to make two different decisions. They're both aiming for something different. Mary chooses to sit at the feet of Jesus and listen to him. Now, on the surface, we can simply just picture that scene, right? And understand that Mary was sitting with Jesus, spending time with him, and listening to what he was saying and teaching. But to dig just a little deeper, the fact that she is sitting at his feet is significant. To sit at someone's feet like that meant that you were taking the posture of a disciple. It implies that you're learning from that person in a formal way. You're submitting to their authority. Mary here is taking the position of a student. Now, in those times, this was not a position for a woman to take. Women were expected to take care of the homes and support religious practices. They weren't really to participate directly, certainly not as students. So culturally speaking, Mary was not where she was supposed to be. But we see here, as we see throughout the Scriptures, that Jesus was elevating the position of women. Jesus welcomed women as disciples, and Jesus was forming a community where women could fully participate. So Mary's aim here in defined convention, her aim is to spend time with Jesus. Her aim is to learn from Jesus, to be with him. Her aim is to be an active, attentive, present disciple. And this is why Martha is a little bit frustrated. Martha feels like Mary should be helping her. It specifically says that she was distracted by all of the preparations. She's not distracted by random things or random tasks. It's not as if she's scrolling through her phone or having to make cupcakes for the school bake sale that she just found out about. She loves Jesus. She's taking action. She's getting food ready for this meal, and it's a lot of work. There's a lot of people there to feed. Martha's aim is very practical. She wants to show hospitality. She wants to make sure that everyone that's come to her home is going to be fed. That's her aim. One sister has chosen to aim for adoration. One sister has chosen to aim for action. Mary chooses to sit. Martha chooses to stand. Martha's frustration, I think, is valid. Given the societal norms at the time, it was a fair expectation that Mary would be helping her sister. So Martha complains to Jesus. She says, "Don't you care? Tell her to help me." Now, Jesus' response in verse 41 is important. He says, "Martha, Martha." We might gloss over this, but it's important. To say somebody's name twice meant that you were inviting that person closer to you. Saying someone's name twice meant that you wanted to speak to them intimately. So Jesus here, he's not annoyed. He's not frustrated. He's not upset with Martha. Jesus has heard her concerns, and he's inviting Martha to come close to him and speak intimately, like close friends. We see a couple of examples of this throughout Scripture. Genesis 22, for example, when Abraham is tested, the angel of the Lord calls out, Abraham, Abraham. We see it also in Exodus 3, when Moses is at the burning bush, God calls out to him from the burning bush, Moses, Moses. So Jesus is inviting Martha close to him to have a little bit of a heart-to-heart conversation here. And it's important to understand that what Martha chose to do was not the wrong thing. Her aim was noble. She chose to stand. She chose to take action. She chose to serve. In this specific instance, though, the better choice was to spend time with Jesus. He wasn't going to be with them in their house for very long, and indeed his time on earth as a whole was coming to an end. Martha didn't make the wrong choice, but there was a better choice to make. Jesus was in her house. He was there to spend time with his friend who he loved. There was nothing wrong with what Martha was doing, but Jesus wanted to spend time with her. But she was distracted by her service. Action, adoration. Two important aims. Both are important characteristics, but they needed to be in balance. The lesson that Martha learns, which applies to us as well, is this: work without worship produces worry. Her work, her service distracted her from Jesus, and she got upset. Work without worship produces worry. We talked about this just a few weeks ago when it was really summer, when we talked about the Sabbath. If you missed that, you can just type in here on our YouTube page, "How do I rest?" But if you recall that conversation, the scriptures teach us that we're to set aside one day each week for the Lord. It's a Sabbath. It's more than just a day off. It's a day where you're dedicating time to your relationship with God. You're setting time aside for God. You're acknowledging that he is your provider, that you trust him enough to stop working, to cease from everything else and give God uninterrupted, dedicated time. Mary ignores tradition. She ignores the cultural expectation. She's not distracted, and she sits at the feet of Jesus. Work without worship produces worry. Even good and noble aims need to be adjusted in order to make time for worship. Work without worship produces worry. That's exactly what happened to the church in Ephesus. They worked, but without worship. You can turn to Revelation 2. Revelation 2, 2-3. I know your deeds, your hard work, and your perseverance. I know that you cannot tolerate wicked people, that you have tested those who claim to be apostles but are not, and have found them false. You have persevered and have endured hardships for my name and have not grown weary. They're doing a lot of good things. They're taking action. They're standing up. They're getting their business done. But verse 4, yet I hold this against you. You have forsaken the love that you had at first. They were working, but without worship. Their love and passion had cooled into routine. They still did the work, but their hearts were no longer burning for love for Jesus. They had labor without love. They had work without worship. Like Martha, they were distracted by all the work that had to be done. Work without worship produces worry. Work and worship, adoration and action, both are important and need to be in balance. We have this brief interaction here with Jesus and his friends. But just before this interaction, as we saw last week, Jesus told the parable of the Good Samaritan. Right? A man is robbed. He's beaten. He's left half dead on the side of the road. A priest and a Levite, they see him, but they walk right past the man. They cross the road. They go to the other side. But a Samaritan, a social and religious outsider, stops, takes action, and helps the man. The parable is emphasizing action. It's contrasting this interaction here with Mary and Martha. Here, Mary chose adoration. It was the better choice. But in the parable of the Good Samaritan, action was the better choice. And in fact, in that instance, it was more than better, it was the right choice. See, the priest and the Levite, they don't stop to help the man because their worship actually got in the way of taking action. There were rules for the priests and the Levites. If they took action and helped the man, they likely would have been covered in blood, potentially a dead man's blood, and that would have made themselves unclean. according to the rules for priests as spelled out in Leviticus 21. If they took action, it may have prevented them from performing their duties in the temple. They chose adoration over action. They chose worship over work. Both are important, but they need to be in balance. Just as work without worship produces worry, worship without work produces stagnation. If you wanted to be harsher, you could say worship without work produces hypocrisy. We read in James 2:17, for example, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. Work and worship, adoration and action, they need to be in balance. They are both important. You can imagine that adoration, so worship, love, reverence. Adoration is the internal fire. Action, your choices, your behavior, your lifestyle. Action is the external flame. Adoration is the internal fire. Action is the external flame. They need each other. They need to be in balance. Work without worship produces worry. Worship without work produces stagnation. You need to tend to the internal fire so that you can keep the external flame burning. You need to sit at the feet of Jesus today so that you can stand in service tomorrow. Worship and action, they're meant to fuel and sustain each other. You need to tend to both. So that's where the question of what are you aiming for comes into play. When it comes to your faith journey, the decisions, the choices you make, when it comes to your faith, what are you aiming for by participating in this activity or choosing to do that or choosing not to do something? Is the decision that you're making something that's going to tend to the internal fire, or is this a decision that's going to tend to the external flame? What's the aim? What's the goal? What's the purpose of whatever decision you're making when it comes to your faith? You need to have a clear aim. But it also has to be in balance. If you're being intentional about understanding what you're choosing to aim at, then if you're noticing that you're being drawn a lot to the external, the acts of service, then you need to recognize that you may need to switch up the aim and get things back in balance. Worship and action are meant to fuel and sustain each other. You can picture it kind of like an oil lamp. And we don't really use oil lamps too often, but you can picture it like that. See, you and I, we're kind of like an oil lamp. We're designed to shine light, but on our own, we don't have any light to shine. The lamp first has to be filled with oil. This is worship, love, adoration. It's the feeding that internal fire. You can think of Psalm 92:10, which says, I've been anointed with fresh oil. Now that the oil is in the lamp, you can actually light the external flame, and that's going to shine outward. This is action. This is service. But what happens if you let the lamp burn too long? You're going to notice that the oil starts to drop. And if you burn it long enough, it will empty out, and the flame will be extinguished. So you have to refill it. Oil, flame, then refill the oil to keep that flame going. Refill it again, and so on and so forth. Worship produces action, but you have to refill to keep the action going. Worship and action are connected. They're integrated. They need to be in balance. You need to be intentional about making decisions that will refill you spiritually and decisions that will also produce an external flame. Tend to both aims, but recognize that they're interconnected. Ultimately, the aim is to have a balance. Jesus modeled this balance for us. He doesn't swing between extremes. Jesus maintains a consistent rhythm of tending to the internal fire and maintaining that external flame. So what are some things that we can look at from Jesus? Well, prioritize time with God. Again, we spoke about Sabbath in detail a few weeks ago. We're not going to rehash all of that. You can just type in, how do I rest? Jesus prioritized spending time with God. Mark 1:35, for example, says this. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. We can recall Luke 5:15-16. Yet the news about him spread all the more, so that crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sicknesses. but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Or we can think of one of Jesus' most well-known miracles where he feeds the 5,000. Well, immediately after this incredible miracle, Matthew 14:23 says, after he had dismissed them, the large crowd, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. For Jesus, spending quality time with God was non-negotiable. Jesus was busy. There were always people trying to see him or to speak with him or to be healed by him. Jesus also had a very tight timeline. His time for ministry on earth was short, yet he prioritized time with God. Jesus modeled for us that the external flame depended on the internal fire. Worship was the source. It refilled. So prioritize time with God. Maintain a Sabbath day. Find a good devotional book that's going to help you get into the scriptures a little bit each day. Establish a pattern of consistent prayer. Join a group. We've got 2 ladies' Bible studies, one on Wednesday afternoon, one on Thursday morning. There's a Sunday night group for both men and women, and the men meet the first Saturday of the month. Those are some practical ways to help ensure that you are prioritizing time with God. Second thing that we see from Jesus, I'm sure we can all come up with examples of how Jesus poured himself out for others. So be empowered to serve others. Jesus didn't worship in isolation. This intimacy with God, it didn't make him withdrawn or passive. It fueled Jesus. It empowered him to serve others. I'm sure we can all come up with lots of examples, right? But Jesus' heart was often moved with compassion towards groups of people or even specific individuals. Of course, we can think of Jesus washing the feet of his disciples and many other examples. The internal fire fueled that external flame. Jesus' actions were never detached from God. What kind of actions can you take to serve others here within your church community? Well, you heard about it earlier. Anita did a great job talking about the Operation Christmas Child, packing a shoebox or 2 or 12. That's a good practical way, isn't it? The clothing and the snack drive going on for the kindergarten kids at Byron Somerset, the carts for the food bank. Those study groups that I mentioned, they always need leaders, they need helpers, they need snack bakers. Sunday school needs teachers. It concerns me, Ron, that you're up here. What is going on downstairs right now? Ball hockey needs coaches. Camps need volunteers. Santa Claus parades need participants. There's no shortage of opportunities for you to be involved and to take real action. There's no shortage of opportunities to let that external flame burn. You just have to choose what you aim for. Finally, not only did Jesus model this balance, but he specifically taught it and affirmed it too. This is what he's doing here in these passages in Luke, and he spells it out again specifically in Mark 6, for example. There, Jesus has sent out the 12. He sends them to village to teach, and he gives them authority to heal. So they go out and they do as they've been instructed. And after a time, they come back to Jesus and they report to him all that they've done. In verses 31 and 32, Jesus says to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. It's like he's saying, you were obedient, you were serving, you were standing in action, but now it's time to be refilled. It's time to come and sit with me. You need to sit at the feet of Jesus today so that you can stand in service tomorrow. This week, I want you to be intentional. Know what you're aiming for. Think of King with an apple on his head. What are you aiming for? Set aside time, uninterrupted time this week to sit at the feet of Jesus. And think about it. Be intentional. What's at least one way, practically, that you can serve this week? Work without worship produces worry, but worship without work leads to stagnation. True disciples tend to both aims, and they live in the balance, a heart rooted in Christ with hands that are ready to serve. Let your adoration fuel your action, and let your actions be sustained in his presence. In just a minute, I'm going to show you a video to close our time, and then the worship team will come back up. But you know that sometimes our life gets so filled with distractions or even just routine. It's easy to lose focus on what matters, and it's easy to lose focus on a proper balance. If we don't stop and ask, what am I aiming for? It's just easy to be swept up in the day-to-day without even realizing it. In this video I'm going to show you, it's going to point out that if we're not intentionally moving towards Christ, then we're just getting further away.
The way of the world, the familiar, the routine, drifting toward the same ends, heading off in the distance, as if there was no other way. But when you meet Christ, you realize there's a different direction. A guide that invites you on a countercultural pilgrimage. You find a sweet harmony in conversation, in step with him. You realize the blessing that it is to be near to him. He asks you to drop everything, to follow the path toward him. And while the walk is certainly not without its challenges, you are not left unattended. But it's easy to lose focus. It may not be intentional, but if you're not disciplined to move, the gap can widen, and you'll become used to your callousness. He desires to have you close, and you remember how pleasing it is. But the affairs of the world can become rather overwhelming, and there are times when you feel trapped, times when you get preoccupied, distracted, pushed, pulled, bogged down. And you realize the instant that you're not actively moving toward him, you're moving away from him. Remember who called you to this journey and run to him.